I think there was this moment that I always will remember after the first screening that we had of the film in London. Catherine Lee, who was one of our lesbian PE teachers who inspired the story, but also an advisor on the film, she came up to me and gave me a big hug after the screening, and she said, "How did you know?" in my ear. And I was like, she obviously felt like we had done her story justice, which was an amazing feeling, but also I felt like, well, it's not that I knew exactly what you were going through, but aspects of my own experience are in this story as well. And it feels like a very specific story about a very specific person at a particular moment in time, but to me it's not that. It was always, I always set out to make a film that would speak to anyone with any experience of ever being othered in any way, and so in that way I hoped that the specificity of Jean's experience would enable it to be in some way universal. But yeah, that moment when she said, "How did you know?" was stuck with me, because I don't know what it feels like to be Catherine in the 1980s, but I took a little piece of that and I put it together with a little piece of me and a little piece of lots of other people, and she felt like a piece of Rosie as well, and she felt like it was, that it got to the feeling, the crux of the feeling that she had. But yeah, it wasn't that I knew, it was more just that I had my own version of that to put into it.
Beautiful. I
How
loved
beautiful
it.
that everyone feels that. It's so beautiful. You think you're struggling in your own world, but actually everything we're probably struggling with aligns with every other person in some way or another.
Yeah, any person who feels different from the norm will understand the movie, even if you're, So Georgia, why did you choose this topic as your first film? And by the way, all the critics are, wow, what a first movie. What has she done? I don't know if you read the critics, they're amazing.
Thank you. Why as my first movie? I would say as a human, I was sort of getting to the point. They always tell you when you're trying to set out to make short films, they're always like, you have to have something to say, and I remember always feeling very daunted by that. Fuck, what is it? What do I have to say? I don't have anything to say. But I think I got to a point in my life where I had, it wasn't that I felt like I had something to say, but I had a lot of feeling that I needed to kind of put into something. But I was also very scared by that. I was scared by the kind of how intimate a process it might be to kind of mine my own experiences. And so I was drawn to finding a story that had a framework, that had real people who had lived a particular life at a particular time, and I could research the hell out of it and meet loads of people and talk to them about their experiences. But then I would be able to channel a lot of my own stuff, not just experiences, but feelings about things and rage and whatever else into it, in a way that felt less daunting, I think, as a first film. And I was also less daunted by it because I felt like here is a moment that exists that people have kind of forgotten about. I feel compelled to tell the story to anyone who hasn't heard of it before, but also there's a framework here. I can speak to people. There are real events that happen, and I can kind of structure the film around them. And that, for someone who'd never written a screenplay before, that felt like quite liberating, because it took the fear away from the blank page and meant that I was able to just throw myself into the research.
Rosie, it's been 20 years since the story, since since the time of when the film takes place. How much do you think has the situation changed in general?
Well, I mean, a lot of the sort of microaggressions that Jean experiences, conversations she has with her sister at work, are not from the 80s. They're from their experiences that Georgia has had and has mentioned one way or another today. So although the setting is very different, I think ultimately there is still not that much change in people's ignorance. And also, if you look at some of the political stances that are happening now, for example, the Don't Say Gay bill is basically Section 28 happening all over again, mirrored. So I guess it's stories like this that people empathize and begin to understand, because really it's so much ignorance that leads to that point that hopefully will start to shift something. But no, I don't think a lot has changed at all.
How did you accomplish to let us know? I mean, it's a process of self-acceptance and self-liberation, but the way you tell the story is very subtle. It's like, I'm sure it's difficult to. What you did is not easy.
Well, good writing helps. And I think having Georgia, having a director and an actor whose ideas line so perfectly, I felt like I was in safe hands, so I could take myself to certain places. And I felt like, because I trusted Georgia so much, I could pull back in certain places where that was my instinct, but she would say it's still reading on camera, the less that I ended up doing, but knowing that I had Georgia to be like, I can still see in your mind what you're thinking and what's going on. That obviously really helped. One actor once told me that he watches all his takes on the screen because he wants to try and do as little as possible, but still be as clear as possible. So Georgia was ultimately my mirror to help me do that, because it had to be subtle, because Jean's been pretending for a whole lifetime. You know, there's 30 years of this. She's very good at hiding things. So it all had to sit very deep.
So, Georgia, how much is this a story of, I won't say self-hatred, but we assume the vision that society has of ourselves, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That was something I wanted to talk about, was just that when you are sort of hit over the head with so much messaging that tells you that you don't belong, that you don't fit in the world, that the model of the world that everybody wants is not what you are, then it is impossible to not internalize those feelings, and that's where internalized homophobia stems from. And I was really fascinated by that, because I think a lot of people go through a process, a lot of queer people go through a process of kind of identifying that in themselves and having to kind of unravel it. And what we look at in the film is a very heightened version of that. But I would say most queer people that I've spoken to have some experience of that, of not having known that they had necessarily internalized certain messages. And we spoke a lot. I remember Rosy and I talking about the showers in the film, how, you know, when Jean goes into the showers, what is it that she feels? And the teachers that we spoke to in research, they spoke a lot about the showers and how it was this kind of like battleground, and how society's projection of lesbian women as predatory kind of worms its way into their own heads, and then when they step into that space they feel uncomfortable, and it's not anything to do with how they feel about themselves or how they feel about those teenagers. It's about the societal impression of queer people being predatory, and that they've internalized that, and therefore they feel uncomfortable, and it's such a difficult thing to unravel. But yeah, it was something that I'd sort of felt in my own life and wanted to look at in the film.
I love the fact that she's very professional, and she respects who she is as a professional person, but then she has many personal doubts. So I guess that was a super turmoil inside, no? Like she's divided in a way. I'm sure that was hurtful.
Yeah. I think she's quadrupled, probably. I think she's got, 1,000 different masks. It's like the version she is with her sister is a very specific version of her. We don't see anywhere else in the film, apart from when it's just them two. And then her brother-in-law comes in the room and she shifts again. In school, in the staff room, to the person she is with the kids, to the person she is at home. I think ultimately the only place she probably really can relax is when you see her right at the beginning, watching Blind Date in her home. But even then, there's this sort of the presence of the car coming, and her sort of blinkers are always on, deer in headlights. But she's very professional. I think ultimately she's really good at her job. She's an amazing teacher, and I think that just adds to the stakes and the sadness that this thing this sort of presence that she feels like she can't break free from is stopping her doing her job, which she's absolutely destined to do.
So we're out of time because there are other people who want to talk to you. Congratulations. I love the film.
Thank you so much.
You.
It's been a
It
pleasure.
was like
Thank
going to therapy.
That's what we like.
Oh, good. Good.
Without paying for the
I think
session.
good. Yeah.